When Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory arrived to inspect Landing Zone 2, it became apparent to all concerned that what had crashed in the desert was something out of this world. And they say, well, where's the pieces? Well, there are even pieces now that have been studied that they claim come from Roswell, and they contain bismuth, zinc, and I've held some of this in my own hand. It's obviously manufactured. This is not natural formations. They're layered, okay? And that is not been able, they've not been able to trace this to any manufacturing process known on the earth. So don't let anybody tell you that there's no hard evidence. Admittedly, these are little bitty pieces because where's the ship? Where's the body? They took them all away. They hid them away. So, with Roswell, it comes down to an article of faith. Do you want to believe the U.S. Air Force report with little or no documentation that says nothing happened? A few various debunkers with no first-hand information, or the news media, which is no real knowledge of the issue? Or do you want to believe the initial press release, more than 400, it's now 600 witnesses on the public record, thousands of leaked government documents, radar contacts, unknown bits of metal, and the fact that they went around making death threats to U.S. citizens in the wake of this Roswell incident? I don't care how important the mogul balloon was, it would have never justified telling police officers and even a 15-year-old girl that if you talk about this, they're going to be finding your bones out in the desert. I'm sorry, but there's no excuse for that kind of secrecy. Not in a democratic, free country, no matter how damaging the information may be. Let me tell you how to handle that. During World War II, the Japanese were testing what they call fuego balloons or fire balloons, and they would launch these balloons from way up north, and they would drift across the Pacific and mostly come into the Pacific Northwest. And they were timed so that at a certain time they would break loose and they'd drop fire bombs. And the idea was to set big forest fires up in the Northwest to just confuse us, confound us, tie up men and material. One of them landed all the way like into Kansas or somewhere. A female reporter found out about it, went out, was on the scene, and said, boy, have I got a good story. We found this Japanese fire balloon here in Kansas. The FBI went to her and said, lady, if you run this story, the Japanese will be able to know where this balloon landed. They will be able to calculate how effective the balloon was and what the wind currents are and everything else, and you're going to be giving aid and comfort to our enemy in a time of war. And she said, okay. And she did not publish the story until after the war. Now, that's the way you handle a secret. You don't make death threats against the civilian population. So, what do you want to believe? Did it happen or it didn't happen? It's up to you. All I can say is, the government says it didn't happen. Now, do we trust the government? How many times have they lied to us? I lost count. I hate to say this. I want to be a true blue American. And I was in the Army. But I remember taking that oath. And I swore to protect not the President, not the Congress, not the state of Texas. I swore to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign or domestic. And these are domestic enemies. We know about Colonel Carso. He found whistleblowers. The whistleblowers are all over the place. You would have heard more except for the control media and except for the fact that so many of them are hesitant to speak out because many of them did sign secrecy oaths, and the people who reach rank in the military are generally men of honor and integrity. And when they pledge that they'll not talk about something, then generally they don't. The onus does not lie with them. The onus lies with the people who made them promise to be secret about what is probably the most stupendous story in the history of the human race. And they're supposed to shut up about it. Even astronauts have said that we have gained material based on crashed alien vehicles. Where it all came down, and this was the start of the whole problem we have, was the National Security Act of 1947. Now, before 1947, there had been a little talk about changing the name from the War Department to the Defense Department. Well, that's a little public relations move. Nobody wants to think they're supporting the war, but everybody wants to support defense. That's just PR. Okay, and there had been talk about separating the Air Force from the Army. It used to be the Army Air Corps, you know. And there had been talk about coordinating the intelligence services through a central intelligence agency to prevent duplication of effort with the Naval Intelligence, Army Intelligence, Air Force Intelligence. But what really got the ball rolling was Roswell. Immediately after the crash at Roswell, which is early July 1947, immediately they began to quickly put together the National Security Act of 1947 to rush into law. And in September of 1947, Harry Truman, who was president, was trying to get home to visit his mother who was dying, and they held him at National Airport for hours until they could rush out this National Security Act to get his signature on it so that, bam, they could make it into law. Why the rush? And what did it do? It separated the Air Force from the Army, created the Air Force branch, we know that. It renamed the War Department to the Defense Department. It created the CIA, which has been the bane of our existence ever since. But what a lot of people miss is probably the most important facet of the National Security Act of 1947. It created the National Security Council. And if you'll think about it, everything from Vietnam to the invasion of Panama to the invasion of that island down in the Caribbean, whose name escapes me at the moment, Grenada, to everything else going on is all the National Security Council. And what did I just tell you? Barack Obama's National Security Advisor said there's a command chain that still exists in the National Security Council. The Iran-Contra scandal. Colonel North, who's admitted he lied to Congress and hence lied to the American public. But he said, but I had full approval of the president. Problem is, he didn't say which president. Everybody thought he meant President Reagan. But it turns out that all the documents signed on the Iran-Contra scandal were all signed by Vice President Bush. So Bush has been giving us trouble all along. But it's all done under the National Security Council, because anything that smacks of national security obviously would come under the purview of the National Security Council. This, my friends, is when they bypassed the Constitution, the Congress, the news media, and the American public. This is when the shadow government came into being. This is exactly what happened. And of course, one of the items they had to keep secret was UFOs. And this is still being held within the Technology Committee, or whatever they want to call it, of the National Security Council. And who's in charge of that? I've already told you. Henry Kissinger, for God's sakes. Okay? And this is where the secret has been held all this time. A secret that you, all your neighbors, everyone on earth should know about. What's the secret? We are not alone. Okay? For better, for worse. Who knows? We could argue all night over whether are they good or they bad or whatever. We'll get some of that. They immediately created Majestic 12. Here are the original members. Okay? One of them, James Forrestal, our very first Secretary of Defense, apparently didn't go along with this program, because they said, well, he's got a mental problem. They put him in Bethesda Naval Hospital, and he either fell or was pushed out of a 17th-story window. But we now find out, and all these documents have leaked out, including this manual, Extraterrestrial Entities and Technology Recovery and Disposal, Standard Operating Manual 101. All right? Press blackout. Never let the press know what's going on. This all stems back to early 50s. 1952, when flying saucers came over Washington They were, and at that time, everybody in the